What started as a routine late-night interview turned into television chaos when comedian Amy Schumer and host Jimmy Kimmel engaged in a brutal on-air confrontation that ended with security being called and a guest storming off set in fury. The studio audience settled into their seats, expecting another typical Tuesday night episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live. The energy was electric as the familiar opening theme played, and Jimmy Kimmel emerged from behind his desk with his signature grin, waving to the cheering crowd. But beneath his polished exterior, something felt different tonight. There was an edge to his usual charm, a sharpness that would soon cut through the veneer of late-night television pleasantries. "Welcome back to Jimmy Kimmel Live," he announced, his voice carrying across the packed studio. "Tonight we have a very special guest, someone who's been making headlines recently for all sorts of reasons. Please welcome the always controversial Amy Schumer." The audience erupted in applause as Amy walked onto the stage, dressed in a sleek black blazer and jeans, her confidence radiating as she waved to the crowd. She looked composed, professional, ready for what she assumed would be a standard promotional appearance. The two exchanged the customary hug and air kisses before settling into their respective seats, the cameras capturing every moment for the millions watching at home. Jimmy's opening remarks seemed innocent enough. "Amy, it's great to have you back on the show. You look fantastic tonight, really fantastic." His eyes lingered on her appearance in a way that made several audience members shift uncomfortably in their seats. "I have to say, and I hope this doesn't sound inappropriate, but you look like you've really slimmed down since the last time you were here. I mean, wow, what's your secret?" Amy's smile flickered for just a moment, a flash of something darker crossing her features before she recovered. "Thanks, Jimmy. I've been focusing on my health and wellness, the usual stuff people do when they want to feel good about themselves." But Jimmy wasn't done. He leaned back in his chair with that familiar smirk that his regular viewers knew all too well. "No, but seriously, I'm genuinely surprised. You look completely different. I almost didn't recognize you when you walked out here. What did you do? Hire a whole team of trainers? Because the transformation is really dramatic." The studio audience began to sense the tension building. Amy's jaw tightened slightly, her media-trained composure beginning to crack around the edges. She had dealt with comments about her appearance her entire career, but something about Jimmy's tone, his emphasis on the word surprised, felt particularly cutting tonight. "Well, Jimmy, I think it's interesting that the first thing you want to talk about is my weight," Amy replied, her voice steady but with a new sharpness. "I came here to talk about my new project, but apparently my body is more newsworthy to you than my work." Jimmy laughed, but it was hollow, forced. The audience's laughter felt equally strained. "Oh, come on, Amy, don't be so sensitive. I'm giving you a compliment here. You should be happy that people notice when you take care of yourself. I mean, in this business, image is everything, right?" That's when something shifted in Amy's demeanor. Entirely. The professional mask began to slip away, revealing the sharp-tongued comedian who had built her career on calling out exactly this kind of behavior. "Sensitive? Jimmy, let me ask you something. When was the last time you opened an interview with a male guest by commenting on how surprised you were by their weight loss? When was the last time you told a man he looked completely different, and you almost didn't recognize him?" The studio fell into an uncomfortable silence. Jimmy's smile wavered as he realized the interview was veering into dangerous territory. This wasn't the playful banter he had anticipated. The production team in the control room began frantically, whispering among themselves, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let the confrontation play out. "Look, I didn't mean anything by it," Jimmy said, his voice taking on a defensive edge. "I was just being honest. In Hollywood, when someone makes a positive change, people notice. That's not a bad thing, Amy. You're being way too dramatic about this." Amy leaned forward in her chair, her eyes locked on Jimmy's. "Dramatic? You want to know what's dramatic, Jimmy? The fact that you think it's appropriate to comment on a woman's body before even asking about her career. The fact that you're acting like my worth as a person is tied to whether or not I meet your personal standards of attractiveness. The tension in the studio was now palpable. Audience members were looking around at each other, unsure whether to laugh, clap, or remain silent. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every uncomfortable moment of what was quickly becoming one of the most explosive interviews in late-night television history. Jimmy's facade was beginning to crumble. You know what, Amy? I think you're taking this way too seriously. This is supposed to be fun, light entertainment. If you can't handle a simple observation about how good you look, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and Amy's expression hardened into something that anyone who knew her comedy would recognize as dangerous. The audience held its collective breath, sensing that something significant was about to happen. In the control room, producers were debating whether to end the segment, but it was already too late to stop what was coming next. Amy stood up slowly from her chair, her movement deliberate and controlled. The studio lights caught the fire in her eyes as she looked down at Jimmy, who suddenly seemed much smaller behind his desk. You know what, Jimmy? You're absolutely right. I can't handle your simple observation. Because your simple observation is actually years of misogynistic garbage wrapped up in a fake compliment. The audience was completely silent now. Even the usual rustling of programs and shifting in seats had stopped. Jimmy's smile had vanished entirely, replaced by a look of genuine surprise and growing anger. He wasn't used to guests challenging him so directly, especially not on his own show. Misogynistic? Jimmy scoffed, his voice rising slightly. That's ridiculous, Amy. I was being nice to you. I was complimenting you. The fact that you're turning this into some kind of feminist lecture says more about you than it does about me. Amy's laugh was sharp and humorless. A feminist lecture? Jimmy, this is basic human decency. But since you want to go there, let's talk about your track record. How many times have you made jokes about women's appearances? How many times have you reduced accomplished women to their dress size or their dating life? You think I haven't been watching? The production team was in full panic mode now. The segment producer was making frantic hand gestures from the wings, trying to signal Jimmy to move to commercial, but he was too focused on the confrontation unfolding before him. His face was flushed, his carefully styled hair slightly disheveled, from running his hands through it. You're being completely unfair, Jimmy shot back, his voice taking on a whining quality that made him sound petulant rather than authoritative. I treat all my guests with respect. If you can't take a joke or handle normal conversation, maybe you're the problem here, not me. That was the moment Amy's composure finally snapped. Her voice rose to match his, cutting through the studio like a blade. Normal conversation? Jimmy, you literally told me you almost didn't recognize me because I lost weight. You acted shocked that I could look different. Do you understand how insulting that is? Do you understand what that says about what you thought of me before? The cameras captured every moment of Jimmy's face, as the reality of his words seemed to hit him. But instead of backing down or apologizing, he doubled down with the arrogance that had made him enemies throughout the industry. Look, Amy, I'm sorry if you're insecure about your weight, but that's not my problem. I was trying to be positive, trying to acknowledge that you've made improvements. If you want to twist that into something ugly, that's on you. Several audience members audibly gasped. The word improvements hung in the air like a slap. Amy's face went through a series of expressions: shock, hurt, and then pure fury. She took a step closer to Jimmy's desk, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried throughout the entire studio. Improvements? You think my body needed improving? You think I was somehow broken or defective before? Her voice began to rise again, each word hitting harder than the last. You arrogant, self-important little man. Who made you the judge of women's bodies? Who gave you the authority to decide what constitutes an improvement? Jimmy was visibly flustered now, his usual quick wit completely abandoned. I didn't say you were broken. You're putting words in my mouth. I was being supportive. Supportive? Amy's voice cracked with incredulous laughter. Jimmy, you want to know what supportive looks like? Supportive would have been asking about my new comedy special. Supportive would have been talking about my writing, my career, my achievements. But no, the first thing out of your mouth was about my body, because that's all you see when you look at women. The tension had reached a breaking point. Jimmy stood up behind his desk, his face red with anger and embarrassment. You know what? I've had enough of this. You came on my show and you're attacking me for trying to be nice. You're being completely unreasonable and, frankly, you're making yourself look bad on national television. Amy laughed again, but this time it was filled with genuine amusement at his audacity. I'm making myself look bad? Jimmy, you just told a woman that her body needed improvements and then called her insecure when she called you out on it. Every woman watching this show knows exactly what just happened here. The audience was beginning to murmur now, some people starting to clap in support of Amy, while others sat in uncomfortable silence. The divide in the room was becoming obvious, and Jimmy could sense that he was losing control of not just the interview, but his own show. You know what your problem is, Amy? Jimmy's voice cut through the growing audience noise, his tone shifting from defensive to openly hostile. You can't handle success. You've built your entire career on being the victim, on complaining about how unfair everything is. And now that someone actually gives you a genuine compliment, you turn it into an attack because that's all you know how to do. The studio fell dead silent again. Even the production crew stopped moving. Jimmy had crossed a line that everyone in the room could feel, but he was too caught up in his own anger to notice. His face was flushed, his carefully maintained TV persona completely shattered. Amy's expression went from fury to something colder, more dangerous. When she spoke, her voice was steady, calculated, and devastating. A genuine compliment? Jimmy, let me tell you what a genuine compliment sounds like. Amy, I loved your last special. Amy, your writing is brilliant. Amy, thank you for using your platform to speak up for women. But no, your version of a compliment is telling me you're surprised I don't look disgusting anymore. That's not what I said, Jimmy shouted, his composure completely gone now. Several audience members visibly recoiled at his outburst. You're twisting everything I say. You're making me out to be some kind of monster when I was just trying to be nice. Amy stepped even closer to his desk, her presence commanding the entire studio. Nice? Jimmy, you want to know what's not nice? What's not nice is reducing women to their appearance every single time they're on your show. What's not nice is acting like weight loss is the most impressive thing a woman can achieve. What's not nice is getting angry when someone calls you out on your behavior instead of actually listening. The cameras captured every moment as Jimmy's face went through a range of emotions: anger, confusion, and what looked suspiciously like panic. He was clearly out of his depth, used to controlling every aspect of his show, but completely unable to handle a guest who refused to play along with his script. I don't reduce women to their appearance, he protested, his voice cracking slightly. I have women on this show all the time. I'm married to a woman. I have daughters. Amy's laugh was sharp and bitter. Oh, the classic defense. I can't be sexist because I know women. Jimmy, having women in your life doesn't give you a free pass to comment on their bodies like they're livestock at a county fair. It actually makes it worse because you should know better. The audience was fully engaged now, some people openly applauding Amy's words while others looked increasingly uncomfortable. The divide was becoming more pronounced, and the energy in the room was electric with tension. Jimmy's desperation was showing. You're being completely unreasonable. This is my show. I've been doing this for years, and I've never had a guest react like this to a simple compliment. Maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe it's you and your attitude. That was the moment Amy's restraint finally broke completely. Her voice rose to fill the entire studio, carrying a power that made everyone sit up straighter. My attitude? Jimmy, my attitude is that I'm tired of men like you thinking you get to judge women's bodies and then acting like victims when we tell you to stop. My attitude is that I'm successful, accomplished, and talented, and I don't need your validation about my appearance to feel good about myself. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing with devastating precision. And my attitude is that viewers deserve better than watching a host who thinks the most interesting thing about his female guests is whether or not they meet his personal standards of attractiveness. Jimmy was visibly shaking now, whether from anger or embarrassment wasn't clear. You're attacking me. This is completely unprofessional. I invite you on my show, I try to be nice to you, and this is how you repay me? By making me look like a villain on national television? Amy's response was immediate and cutting. Jimmy, I'm not making you look like anything. I'm letting you show everyone exactly who you are. You're doing this to yourself with every word that comes out of your mouth. The production team was making increasingly frantic gestures from the wings, but both Jimmy and Amy were too locked in their confrontation to notice. The audience was on the edge of their seats, some people pulling out their phones to record what was clearly becoming a historic moment in television. I know exactly what this is, Jimmy said, his voice taking on a nasty edge that revealed something ugly beneath his public persona. This is you trying to create a viral moment. This is you using my show to get attention for yourself. You're manufacturing outrage because that's what sells these days. The accusation hung in the air like poison, and Amy's face went through a transformation that anyone who knew her comedy would recognize as the moment before she completely destroyed someone on stage. When Amy spoke again, her voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute authority. Every person in the studio leaned forward to catch her words. Manufacturing outrage. Jimmy, the only thing I'm manufacturing right now is the self-control. It's taking not to walk off this stage and leave you to explain to your producers why your biggest interview of the month just imploded because you couldn't resist commenting on a woman's body. She paused, her eyes never leaving his face. But you know what? I think America deserves to see exactly who you are. So let me spell this out for everyone watching at home. You invited me here tonight, and within 30 seconds of me sitting down, you made my appearance the focus of our conversation. When I politely tried to redirect to my work, you doubled down. When I called you out, you got defensive. And now that you're losing this argument, you're accusing me of creating drama for attention. The studio was completely silent except for the hum of the cameras. Jimmy opened his mouth to respond, but Amy held up a hand that somehow commanded more authority than anything he could say. I'm not done, she continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. You said I can't handle success? Jimmy, I've sold out arenas, written best-selling books, and created content that's made millions of people laugh. My success has nothing to do with whether you think I look good enough for television. The fact that you think it does says everything about how you view women in this industry. Jimmy's face had gone from red to pale, his hands visibly trembling, as he gripped the edge of his desk. Amy, I think we should just… No! Amy cut him off sharply. You wanted to have this conversation, so we're going to finish it. You accused me of being a victim, of building my career on complaints. But the truth is, I built my career on talent, hard work, and the courage to speak truth to power. And, right now, that power is you, sitting behind that desk, thinking you have the right to judge women's bodies on national television. The audience was completely captivated now, some people openly recording with their phones despite venue policies. In the control room, executives were frantically debating whether to cut the feed, but the ratings were climbing by the minute as word spread on social media. Amy turned to address the cameras directly, her voice carrying across the studio and into millions of homes. To every woman watching this right now who has ever been reduced to her appearance, who has ever been told she needs to improve herself to be worthy of respect, who has ever been called sensitive for standing up for herself. This is what it looks like when you refuse to accept that treatment. She turned back to Jimmy, who looked smaller than ever behind his massive desk. And to you, Jimmy, this is what accountability looks like. This is what happens when you treat women like objects and one of them has the platform and the courage to call you out on it. Jimmy made one last desperate attempt to regain control. This is insane. You're completely overreacting to an innocent comment. My audience knows who I really am. Amy's smile was sharp and final. You're absolutely right, Jimmy. Your audience does know who you really are, and after tonight, so does everyone else. The confrontation had reached its inevitable conclusion. Amy stepped back from the desk, her posture straight and confident despite the chaos around her. I came here tonight to talk about my work, my art, my career. Instead, I've had to defend my basic humanity against someone who thinks a woman's worth is measured by how much she weighs. She looked directly into the main camera one last time. I won't be finishing this interview because I have too much respect for myself and for women everywhere to sit here and pretend this is acceptable behavior from anyone, let alone someone with a platform this large. With that, Amy Schumer turned and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking authoritatively against the studio floor. The audience erupted, some applauding thunderously, others sitting in stunned silence. Jimmy called after her, his voice cracking with desperation and anger. Amy? Amy, come back! We can work this out! Don't do this! But she didn't turn around. She didn't acknowledge his pleas or the chaos erupting behind her. Security personnel, unsure of their role in this unprecedented situation, simply stepped aside as she passed. The cameras followed her every step until she disappeared through the studio doors, leaving behind a scene of absolute pandemonium. Jimmy stood alone behind his desk, his face a mask of shock and humiliation, as the studio audience continued their divided response. Some people were on their feet applauding Amy's exit, while others sat in uncomfortable silence. The production team was scrambling to figure out how to salvage the rest of the show. In that moment, everyone in the studio and millions of viewers at home had witnessed something unprecedented in late-night television, a complete dismantling of a host's authority by a guest who refused to play by the old rules. The confrontation had ended not with resolution, but with a powerful statement about dignity, respect, and the courage to walk away when those values are threatened. As Amy Schumer disappeared into the night, she left behind more than just an empty chair and a humiliated host. She left behind a moment that would be replayed, analyzed, and remembered as the night someone finally said enough.